Welcome back to Dad After. Over the last couple episodes, I've shared why I started this podcast and the day that my house went silent. Today, I want to talk about something different. Not because it's easy, but because I think there are a lot of fathers carrying this silently. When people find out your life is falling apart, they usually mean well. They'll tell you things like, it'll get better, just give it time, everything happens for a reason, or you're strong. And I know people say those things because they're trying to help. I've probably said some of them myself. But here's what nobody told me. Nobody told me how strange the next morning would feel. Nobody told me how hard it would be to wake up without hearing little feet running down the hallway. Nobody told me that I'd reach for my phone because I wanted to send my kids a funny picture. Before remembering, they weren't with me. Nobody told me how empty and ordinary Tuesday could feel. Nobody told me that grief doesn't just show up on the big days. It shows up at the grocery store, when you walk past your kid's favorite cereal. It shows up at the gas station when you see a toy and think, my son would have loved that. My daughter would have laughed at this. It shows up driving down a road when you pass the park you used to take them to. Grief has a way of hiding in ordinary places. Nobody told me how much I'd miss being interrupted. Think about that for a second. As parents, we joke about it all the time. Dad, Dad, Dad. You can't even finish a sentence. You can't go to the bathroom without someone knocking on the door. You can't watch a football game without answering 100 questions. And one day, it all stops. Suddenly. You can finish every sentence, watch every game, sit in complete silence, and you trade every minute of that silence for one more interruption. Nobody told me how much my identity was wrapped in the little things. Throwing the baseball, helping with homework, picking up the kids from school, tucking them into bed at night, or just making breakfast on a Saturday morning. Those moments don't feel important while you're living in them until they're gone. And then you realize those little moments were never little at all. They were the life you were building. Maybe that's why starting over hurts so much. Because you're not just rebuilding a life, you're grieving one. You're grieving routines, traditions, habits, and moments. The version of tomorrow you thought was coming. Nobody warned me about any of that. Because they didn't know how. Or maybe because there's just aren't words big enough to explain it. But if you've lived it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know what else nobody told me? How loud your own mind becomes when life finally gets quiet. When the TV is off, the dishes are done, your phone isn't ringing, and there's nowhere else to be. You find yourself sitting there with your own thoughts, and sometimes that's the hardest place to be. I started replaying everything, every conversation, argument, every decision, and moment where I wondered, what if I would have handled that differently? What if I would have said something different? What if I would have been better? Those questions don't come once. They come over and over and over again. And if you're not careful, they'll convince you that living in the past somehow changes it. It doesn't. It just keeps you there. Nobody warned me how easy it would be to isolate myself, to stop answering the phone, to quit reaching out, to tell everyone I'm fine, even when I wasn't. Maybe that's the thing that men just do. We convince ourselves we have to carry everything alone, that asking for help somehow means we failed. But here's what I've learned. The strongest men I know aren't the ones who never struggle. They're the ones honest enough to admit when they do. There were nights I'd sit there and I wasn't really watching television. I wasn't reading anything. I was just existing. Have you ever been there? You're not doing anything. You're just waiting for tomorrow to come because today hurt too much. I think we all had seasons like that. Nobody told me that starting over isn't just physically exhausting, it's mentally exhausting. You're constantly making decisions. Where am I going to live? How am I going to pay for this? When am I going to see my kids? Am I doing enough? Am I failing? What's next? Your brain never seems to turn off, even when you're exhausted, especially when you're exhausted. I remember laying in bed some nights, staring at the ceiling thinking, this can't be my life now. Not because I wanted my old life back exactly as it was, but because I couldn't imagine what a new life was supposed to look like. Nobody hands you a map for starting over. There's no instruction manual, no checklist. You just wake up and try to take one more step than you took yesterday. And maybe that's the hardest part. Not knowing if you're making progress. Because healing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up one morning and say, congratulations, you're healed. It happens slowly. And most of the time you don't even notice it until one day you realize you smiled without forcing it. You laughed. You had a plan for next month. You caught yourself hoping again. Those little moments, they matter. Because they remind you that even after the hardest seasons, life still finds a way to grow. I didn't know it yet, but starting over wasn't just changing my circumstances. It was changing me, slowly, quietly, one day at a time. You know, there were a lot of things nobody warned me about. Some of them seem small, but somehow they're all things that stayed with me the longest. Nobody told me I'd walk through the grocery store and automatically reach for the snacks my kids liked. Then halfway through the aisle I'd stop because they weren't coming over that week. Nobody told me I'd hear the little kid laugh in another aisle, and for just a split second my heart would think, is that one of mine? Nobody told me I'd drive past a park and immediately remember one afternoon with my son or an afternoon with my daughter. It's amazing how memories can hide in ordinary places. Nobody told me how much I'd miss having someone to take care of. As dads, we're wired that way. We solve problems. We carry the big things. Open the jars. We check under the bed for monsters. We fix broken toys and wipe tears away. We don't always notice those moments while we're living them. They're just part of being a dad. And then, one day, those moments aren't there anymore. And you realize those little responsibilities were never a burden. They were a blessing. Nobody told me that I'd still think like a dad, even when my kids weren't with me. I'd see something cool at a store and think, my son would love this. I'd hear a song and think, my daughter would probably sing this at the top of her lungs. Catch myself planning a weekend before remembering the schedule had changed. You don't stop being a father because life changes. Your heart doesn't work on a custody schedule. It doesn't turn on and off. You're a dad every day. Whether your kids are in the next room or somewhere else. I think that's one of the hardest things to explain to someone who's never lived it. People see the days your kids are with you. They don't see the days when they're not. They don't see the quiet evenings, the empty weekends, the random moments when a memory catches you completely off guard. Those are the battles no one sees. And because nobody sees them, a lot of fathers feel like they have to carry them alone. If that's where you are today, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not broken because you miss your children. You're fathers. And fathers love deeply. Sometimes so deeply that ordinary moments become the ones we miss the most. Looking back now, I realize those moments taught me something. They reminded me never to take the ordinary for granted again. Never assume there will always be another bedtime, another school pickup, another Saturday morning, another chance to say, I love you. Because one day, life can change, and suddenly the things I thought were ordinary become the things you miss the most. Nobody told me that starting over would make me appreciate the little things. Maybe that was one of the greatest lessons hidden inside the hardest season of my life. There's one more thing nobody told me. Starting over takes longer than you think it should. I don't know why, but I had this idea in my head that I'd wake up one morning and I'd finally feel like myself again. That one day the pain would just disappear. That I'd somehow know, okay, I'm over it. That's not how it worked. Not for me. Healing didn't happen in one big moment. It happened so slowly that most days I couldn't even tell if I was making progress. Some mornings I felt hopeful. Some mornings I felt like I was right back where I started. Some days I thought, I'm finally getting my feet under me. Then something would remind me of my old life. And it felt like I'd taken 10 steps backwards. If you've ever felt that, I want you to know something. It's normal. It doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. Nobody told me I'd be impatient with myself. I wanted answers. I wanted a plan. I wanted to know exactly what my future was going to look like. But life doesn't usually give us that. Instead, it asks us to trust the next step before we can see the whole path. If I'm honest, I don't like that. I like knowing where I'm going. I like having a plan. I like being able to fix things. But some things can't be fixed overnight. Some things can only be lived through. I also wasn't prepared for how tired I was going to be. Not physically, mentally, emotionally. It's exhausting carrying questions all day long. Wondering if you're making the right decisions. Wondering if your kids are okay. Wondering if you're doing enough. Wondering what your future is supposed to look like. People see you going to work. They see you smiling. They assume you're doing okay. What they don't see is everything you're carrying inside. And here's something I wish another father would have told me. You don't have to have every answer today. You don't have to rebuild your entire life this week. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Your job today is to take the next right step. Maybe that's getting out of bed. Maybe it's going to work. Maybe it's making that phone call you've been avoiding. Maybe it's spending a few hours you have with your kids completely and totally present. Whatever your next step is, take it. And then tomorrow, take another one. Looking back, I spent too much time worrying about where I'd be in 5 years from then, when what I really needed to focus on was becoming a little bit better today than I was yesterday. Not perfect, just better. Because that's how rebuilding happens. Not all at once. One decision, one day, one step at a time. Nobody told me starting over would require patience. Not just in life, but with myself. And maybe that's something you need to hear today too. Give yourself permission to be a work in progress. Because becoming the man your children need isn't something that happens overnight. It's something we choose every single day. I didn't know it then, but all those small steps were leading me somewhere. I just couldn't see it yet. After everything I've shared today, I keep coming back to one thought. I wish someone had told me these things, not because it would have taken the pain away. Nothing could have done that. But because it would have reminded me I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't the only father who had ever laid awake staring at the ceiling. I wasn't the only dad who missed bedtime stories or school pickups or hearing little feet running through the house. I wasn't the only man who questioned himself. I wasn't the only one trying to figure out what life looked like now. I just didn't know anyone who was talking about it. Maybe that's why this podcast exists. Not because I have all the answers, but because I know what it's like to feel like you're walking through a season that nobody understands. If I can save one father from believing he's completely alone, then sitting in front of this microphone is worth it. So let me be the one to tell you, it's okay if you're hurting. It's okay if some days are harder than others. It's okay if the grocery store still reminds you of your kids. It's okay if bedtime is still the hardest part of the day. It's okay if you're still trying to figure out what your life looks like. You're not failing because you're grieving. You're grieving because you love deeply. And fathers who love deeply carry a lot. But let me tell you one more thing. Don't stop living. Don't stop dreaming. Don't stop becoming. Your children still need you. Maybe differently than before. Maybe not every day. Maybe not under the same roof. But they still need you. They still need your voice, your wisdom, your hugs, encouragement, and your example. Never let your circumstances convince you that your calling as a father has ended, because it hasn't. Looking back, I realize nobody could have completely prepared me for starting over. Some lessons you only learn by living. But if I can hand you anything from my journey, it's this. Don't confuse where you are with where you're going. The season you're in right now is exactly that. It's a season. It's not your identity. It's not your future. It's not the end of your story. And maybe one day you'll find yourself sitting across from another father who's struggling. Maybe he'll ask you, how did you make it through? I hope you'll tell him the truth. Tell him it wasn't easy. Tell him there were days you wanted to quit. Tell him there were nights you cried. Tell him there were mornings you didn't know what came next. But tell him this too. You kept showing up, one day at a time, because that's what fathers do. Thank you for spending this time with me. I know this episode wasn't full of quick fixes, because the truth is, there aren't any quick fixes in starting over. But there is hope, and hope grows, one step at a time. Next week, I want to share something that took me a long time to admit, but to myself. The hardest truth I've ever had to face when I looked in the mirror. Until then, keep showing up. Keep fighting for your kids. Keep becoming the man they'll be proud to call dad. This is Dad After. Because life changed, fatherhood didn't. And your story, it isn't over.